Imagine coming home after weeks away, only to find that your property, your safe retreat, has been quietly taken over. The HOA insists they're protecting community standards, but somehow, a neighbor has been living in your cabin, acting like they own the place. When you try to reclaim what's rightfully yours, they don't back down. They call the cops. What happens when the rules meant to protect homeowners are twisted into weapons of control? And just how far will an HOA go to keep their power? Image 2. Warm, serene life before disruption. When David bought his cabin, it wasn't just about owning property. It was about finally having a quiet escape from the noise of city life. Nestled at the edge of a small HOA, controlled community, the cabin was his sanctuary. He spent weekends fixing it up, chopping wood for the fireplace, and enjoying coffee on the porch while watching the sunrise cut across the pines. It wasn't fancy, but it was his, a place he had worked years to afford. Most of the neighbors kept to themselves, exchanging polite waves when passing by. The HO board was present but rarely intrusive, at least at first glance. They sent out monthly reminders about lawn height, trash pickup, and seasonal dues, but nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. David assumed it was just part of living in a managed community. Still, there were hints, small signs that this HOA might not be as harmless as it looked. Stories floated around about surprise inspections, late-night complaints over noise that didn't exist, and board members who acted more like watchmen than neighbors. Some residents brushed it off as petty drama, but others whispered that once the A singled you out, life could get very difficult. David didn't think much of it. After all, his cabin wasn't even a permanent residence. He came and went, paid his dues on time, and followed the rules. What trouble could possibly come from that? But trouble has a way of finding those who least expect it, and one weekend, after returning earlier than planned, David would realize just how far the A's reach extended and how quickly rules could be twisted into excuses for control. David's first clue that something was off came before he even reached his front door. Pulling up the gravel drive, headlights cutting through the twilight, he noticed something strange. The curtains in his cabin were drawn shut. He never left them closed. He liked the sun to flood the place when he wasn't there, chasing away that damp, woodsy smell, but now the windows looked sealed, almost like someone was trying to hide inside. When he opened the front door, his heart sank. A stack of dishes sat in the sink, the smell of cooking oil hung in the air, and shoes, not his, rested neatly by the entrance. Someone had been living there, and not just visiting for an hour or two. This was someone who had settled in. His mind raced. Had his cabin been broken into? Was it squatters? He grabbed his phone to call the sheriff, but before he could dial, there was a knock on the door. Standing outside was Karen. Everyone in the community knew her. Mid-50s, perfectly pressed polo shirts, clipboard always in hand, and the self-appointed watchdog of the HOA. If a blade of grass grew too tall, Karen noticed. If someone parked slightly outside the painted lines, Karen wrote it down. She lived for rules, rules that gave her power. "David," she said coolly, not even pretending to be surprised by his arrival. "You weren't supposed to be here yet. This cabin has been reallocated." The next morning, he returned with printed copies of his deed, his HOA contract, and a determination to get answers. But instead of an explanation, he found a violation notice taped to his door. Improper use of property, it read. The fine I-500. Improper use. He wasn't even allowed inside. Karen's niece had taken over the place, yet somehow he was the one being punished. Still, the harassment escalated. The HOA patrol, volunteers who drove around in golf carts with community watch, magnets slapped on the side, began circling his cabin daily. They'd jot down notes, snap photos, even measure the grass near his driveway. Each visit ended with a new violation notice taped to his door, but the breaking point came one evening, when he tried to step foot inside his own cabin. Karen herself was there, sitting on the porch with her niece. When he demanded access, she smirked and called the police. Within minutes, 2 squad cars pulled up. David explained that it was his property, showed his deed, even pointed out his driver's license with the matching address. But Karen, smooth and confident, told the officers that David was violating an active HOA decision and trespassing under board authority. The officers, clearly uncomfortable, admitted they weren't sure. They'd seen HOA disputes before, messy, full of legal technicalities. They warned David to take it up with the board and suggested he leave for the night to avoid escalation. Escalation. on his own land. David drove away, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He realized then that this wasn't about rules, or dues, or safety. This was about power. Karen had found a way to twist the HOA into her personal weapon, and unless he fought back strategically, she might actually win. So David began to plan. He reached out to other residents quietly, asking if they had faced similar harassment. He had a binder full of evidence, neighbors willing to confirm his story, and a determination that had been forged through weeks of humiliation. The HOA meeting was held in the community lodge, a modest building with wood-paneled walls and folding chairs set in stiff rows. But tonight, it felt like a courtroom. Karen was there, seated in the middle like a queen at her throne, her lips curled in that same condescending smile. Then he played the recording. Karen's voice, sharp and unmistakable, saying the words that had burned into his brain. "You weren't supposed to be here yet. This cabin has been reallocated." The board shifted uncomfortably. Karen's smile faltered for the first time. It happened. From the back row, a resident stood. Then another, and another. Voices rose, demanding accountability, demanding Karen's resignation, demanding a full audit of the HOA's finances. What started as murmurs turned into a tidal wave of outrage. Meanwhile, David got his cabin back. Her niece left quietly one morning, her car loaded with bags, avoiding eye contact with anyone as she drove out of the community for good. When David walked back through the front door and breathed in the pine, tinged air of his own home, relief washed over him. The curtains were open again. The cabin was his sanctuary once more. Together, they organized, they reviewed bylaws, learned the process to call a special election, and rallied signatures from homeowners, tired of living under Karen's thumb. More on the day of the vote, the lodge was packed, more neighbors than anyone could remember seeing at a meeting. David stood tall, binder under his arm, while Karen hovered at the edges, clutching her clipboard as though it could shield her. But the people had spoken. The community was no longer hers to control.